In this video, I'm going to talk to you about YAML. Make sure you stick around, and if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button below and keep an eye out for more videos. Hi, I'm Will from Surridge Tech, and today we're going to be talking about how to use YAML for your configuration, looking at how to split YAML and making use of secrets. If you haven't already, check out the rest of this series, Home Assistant Back to Basics. So let's get going. YAML is a human-readable language used by Home Assistant to configure things. Don't worry, it's really not programming. In fact, YAML is so simple, it's basically just writing a few words. YAML is gradually being depreciated from Home Assistant in terms of its use, but you still need it for various things. That might be to configure some of your integrations, or it might be to add a node to ESP Home, or potentially to add a custom card to your Lovelace. The uses are still there, even if it isn't everywhere anymore like it used to be. There are also various things that you can do in the visual editor or in YAML. These are things like automations or helpers. I prefer to use YAML for this because it enables me to sort them and arrange them in ways that I want. For example, I can have multiple files of input booleans and I can label each one with a comment saying exactly what it's for and where it's used. But again, it's personal preference. You can use the visual editor if you prefer. I'm not going to go into the syntax of YAML because, generally speaking, you're just going to be copying and pasting from an example and changing a few things here and there. So don't worry too much about it. What I am going to say is spacing is key. Spacing and dashes. Generally speaking, something will be a child of something else. So for your Evo Home integration, your child is going to be the username and the password. These are going to want to be indented by 2 spaces. Otherwise it won't work. With children, it doesn't matter which order they come in, as long as they are indented correctly. Sometimes you're also going to need dashes. Dashes are useful if you're creating a list as opposed to a dictionary. So you're creating an array of different things. For example, for my garbage collection, I'm having 2 garbage sensors. So I need a dash before each one, so it knows which is which, or it can separate them out. Anyway, the main point of this video is to split up your YAML into multiple files. And the most important time to do this is with your secrets. Now, secrets don't have to be passwords. They could also be email addresses or postal addresses or API keys. It's good to keep these in a separate location and not just write them in your main configuration file, because then anyone who has access to your configuration file can see your secrets. Home Assistant will have automatically created you a secrets.yaml file, and in here you can write all your secrets. You need to do it in the format of a name for your secret, colon, space, and then the secret. So I'm going to add email, colon, and then put my email address in. And then I can go back to my configuration file or any other file in Home Assistant, and I can reference this. And I reference it by doing !secrets space and then the name I gave that secret. So for example, email. Or for the next one, evo_password. And that will reference that line from your secrets file. Another time you're going to want to split your config up is to make things neater. If you know you're going to have lots of different switches integrated, for example for your broad link, or you're going to be creating lots of different input booleans, you might not want to see all of these in your main configuration file. So you can just reference them and put them in a separate file, or even multiple separate files. If you use YAML for your automations, then you could create a separate file for each automation, and then reference the folder here instead. The simplest way to do this for a single file is to just use the !include tag. So in my config for an input select, I'd use input select !include input select.yaml. And then I can create an input select.yaml file and add my input selects into there. And they will all copy over and work in my Home Assistant configuration. Now that's great, but it only includes one file. What if I wanted to include a selection of files or folders even? This is where input directory comes in. Now there are 4 different ways of configuring this, depending on whether it's a list or a dictionary, a named dictionary. A list is one if there are lots of dashes in front of all the items, and a dictionary is if there aren't dashes in front of all the items, I suppose. But the other way of doing it is if you want to merge it or not merge it. So if you have one item per file, then you don't need to merge it. But if you have multiple items per file, then you need to merge them. Generally speaking, we can ignore all this because generally speaking, you're just going to want to include a whole folder and you don't really care how it does it. You just want everything inside that folder to be included in your configuration. And that's where the star comes in. You'd use the command include _dir_star. And that should include everything within that folder. For some reason, the star doesn't seem to want to work for my input booleans, which is a real shame. So I'm going to use the command include dir merge named boolean slash. And that will include everything, or it will merge all of the directories within the boolean slash folder. If you're confused about which one to use, then you can always just try them out and see which one throws an error in your configuration validator. Or you can visit the Home Assistant website where it gives you examples of which one to use when. So there we go, an intro into splitting YAML and using secrets. Make sure you hit that subscribe button below and click the bell icon to find out more about my smart tech and how you can build yourself the ultimate smart home.